Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 18th audio chat on the Q News Patriot Rumble channel series. I am the Q News Patriot. My name is SG Anon. I'm back with you all with a familiar guest. It's been on the audio chat several different times here, Dr. Kirk Elliott. We're watching the financial world, in particular, as it pertains to the Federal Reserve System, what is now the U.S. Treasury dollar system, according to the U.S. Debt Clock Project, as well as other financial and commerce markets being actively set up for a major squeeze and possibly even a pop event here in real time, going through the events that we're going through right now. We've been watching this conflict develop at least since the beginning of this month in the Middle East. But if we go back to the economic agreements that have been ironed out between these Middle Eastern powers and other powers like Russia, China, and the African nations, as well as others that are within Central and Southeastern Europe, excuse me, what we can see is sort of a setup for the events that were occurring or that we're seeing occur right now. The ability for the Middle East Arab League powers, there we go, it's getting tongue-tied today, the ability for them to maintain their economic fluidity, if you will, going through a process or a crisis like what's happening in the Middle East right now has been a very big concern for a long time. And so the question on everyone's mind is what happens to worldwide energy markets? What happens to worldwide commerce, finance, and shipping and things of that nature if this conflict does indeed explode into an optical World War III event, right? And so I think many of you following this program, familiar with Dr. Kirk and his work and how he's followed these markets and these events for a very long time. He's a man, steeped in faith and really, I think doing his best, as all of us are, to try and do the weatherman model and attempt to predict in a very irregular and uncertain time the things that are going to befall us before we move through really what amounts to a worldwide grab for financial control. And then I think what we see on the other side, which is a diversification and a blooming of we the people. So without further ado, Dr. Kirk, thank you for coming back today.
It's my pleasure. It's great to be with you, SG.
So, since the last time we've talked, it's been a number of weeks now. And while many of us have expected that things like the Middle East conflict would come up and greater conflict would consume Africa and greater destabilization would consume South America, these very important resource-rich areas of the world, I don't think anyone foresaw the level of reflexivity, if you will, the reflexive response from not only the NATO central bank, Washington, D.C. backed West, but also from the other major worldwide powers, India, China, Pakistan, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Russia, and so on and so forth. And one of the things that I think is really important to highlight in this conflict that we're living through, that we're seeing right now here in the Middle East, is that the threat to worldwide energy markets is very real. Israel is supplied by a pipeline, excuse me, that actually runs out of Azerbaijan and moves through the country of Turkey down south near the Syrian countryside, through the Syrian countryside, off the coast under the Mediterranean, and then back over again into the Israeli nation there. And so I think many of us out there are asking the question, what is the implication for an expanded war here in the Middle East? What is the implication for worldwide commerce and finance markets? We look at the situation like with how many commercial debts are owned, for example, or purchased and managed, if you will, by the Japanese economy, or the amount of treasury bonds currently owned by China, which is dumping them at a record rate. So with all of that being said, and since the last time that we've gotten together on air, give us a brief overview of what has transpired at the international financial level as you look at these things, and what is a reasonable expectation of, say, the next 60 days as we look more towards the holiday season and ending 2023?
Well, really good and deep swamp-like answer, right, to that question. I would say we have to look back to August. In August 22nd through the 24th, the BRICS nations met in Durban, South Africa. And on day one of that meeting, Putin said something. He said, we are going to de-dollarize the world. It's our objective and it's irreversible, right? He's talking about the BRICS nations. So what is the purpose of the BRICS nations? They want to be the world's economic, global, political, military superpower, right? That's their goal. That's their agenda. Well, how do you do that? You have to build up a framework to have everybody want to do business with you, right? So by day two, of that, well, the day 3 actually of that meeting, on the day that it ended, what did they do? So part of it is you have to build up their own framework to succeed. Part number 2 is the US dollar is still the world's reserve currency. They got to kick the dollar out of the sandbox, right? You can't just go to the mic and say, hey, we're going to be the world's reserve currency. We're going to be the new petro currency. Because right now, since 1944, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency through the Bretton Woods Act. And then in 1973, that was put on steroids when we became the petrodollar. All international oil settlements traded in the US dollar. So what did the BRICS nations do? Now, if this were Suriname and French Guyana cutting a bilateral trade deal, nobody would care, right? Because they're just small. But the BRICS nations collectively are, with all the countries they just added, really about 70% of the world's population. It's big. I mean, it's a huge trading bloc, SG. So you have to listen to what they're saying, right? Because it actually does matter and it has global economic consequences. So part B of what they want to do is dismantle the US dollar, because we still are the world's reserve currency. We still are the petrodollar, right? So they're doing 2 things: building themselves up, tearing the dollar down. Now, how do you do it in practice? Well, they do what they did by the last day. They added Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates into the BRICS nations. Okay, 2 huge, massive oil producers, right? Well, then come January 1st, which we're only a couple months away from that, they add Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, Argentina, right? So they by January 1st, they're going to have 6 of the 9 largest oil producing countries in the world as part of the BRICS nations. What did that do for all intents and purposes? It dismantled the petrodollar standard completely, because what Putin's objective is through all of this, which he referenced but didn't actually say it in these exact words, is we're going to trade in our own currencies in between the BRICS nations and not use the US dollar for anything, right? So that's demand for their currencies built up. Here you go. You're building up those currencies. Demand for the US dollar goes to the pit. They're tearing the US dollar down. 2 objectives met with 1 policy, right? So this is where now enter in the House. The House lost its speaker in McCarthy. Why? Well, because he basically didn't oppose the debt ceiling raise, right? So it's like, what? He just basically gave them all a blank check and they extended it. And it's like some of the more hardline fiscally conservative people in the GOP said, enough with you, off with your head, kind of a statement. It's like, you're out, get rid of you. I mean, seriously, we can't keep mortgaging future generations of America. So the GOP was without a speaker. Then it became the circus, right, that we've all seen over the last couple of weeks, in which Scalise, fiscally responsible person for the most part, basically got nominated, and then he bowed out. It's like, I don't want to be part of this, what's coming in 2024. I'm out, done. So then Jim Jordan, they bring him to the table, right? And so 6 times they vote, he keeps getting decreasing votes. Why? Because he's a very fiscally responsible politician. Nobody that's part of the globalist agenda wants a fiscally responsible politician, right? They want them to print money like there's no tomorrow because they have a different agenda. Then there was somebody else, and then basically it comes down to the new one, right? Well, who's the new one? Well, Mike, right? So you've got Representative Mike Johnson. He's very, I would say, a God-fearing man, right? Theologically sound, opens up with scripture, says that this is basically all God ordained. For him to get 100% unanimous approval from the House, and for people to say, this evangelical Christian lawyer from North Louisiana has no enemies. It's like, what? How could this be? How could somebody that supposedly has no enemies, that's an evangelical Christian lawyer, get unanimous approval from the GOP, who's basically ousting everybody? Well, I think it was a miracle. I really, truly do. I think that was an answer to prayer. that God's got this, right? I think God's always in control. And these are one of these things where it's like, don't let what the world and mainstream media is telling you be what defines your fear factor, right? We don't have to live with fear because things are starting to happen behind the scenes, right? Which is pretty interesting to me. But there's a battle extraordinaire coming in 2024 because come January 1st, there is no demand for the US dollar. The petrodollar is gone not gone, but 70% of the world's population no longer needs the US dollar with the BRICS nations. So we just lost 70% of our demand for the dollar. We still have entitlements. We still have Social Security. We still have Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, women, infant, children programs, a Defense Department to fund infrastructure, Department of Education. How do you do that when there's no demand for our currency, right? This is how they've been able to do it before. It's just, well, we've got built-in demand for our currency. We're the petrodollar, so let's just keep raising the debt ceiling and we'll just print our way out of it. Not so fast anymore. This is going to be very difficult to do with no international demand for our currency. So here's the erosion process that's starting to happen to the US dollar. And I think it's going to be a massive battle come 2024. Here's the sad thing, SG. What else is happening in 2024? It's an election year, right? So what we've found throughout human history is during times of crisis, when moms and dads can't feed their babies, even Bill Clinton said it's the economy, stupid, right? Where people vote with their wallets, right? So when they will vote, people will tend to give up their freedoms in exchange for perceived security and peace, the ability to feed their family. So this all happens during an election year, right? Where I think people will actually give up their freedoms in exchange for, we'll give you whatever money you want because we have a printing press. Well, the problem is with no demand for our US dollar, the printing press is going to have to go haywire. It's going to have to be running 24/7, 365 days a year just to keep up. And this is a problem. This means, how do politicians respond to that printing? By raising interest rates to slow down that inflation that they just created. It's like, wait a second, Dr. Kirk, didn't they just say that we're winning this battle on inflation? In fact, we're going to have one more rate hike, which is what Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell both said. And then we're going to pause. We're going to pause interest rate hikes, right? So to the normal person listening, they think, great, they've won this battle on inflation. They don't have to keep raising interest rates. They're winning. It's like, no, winning would be they've won the battle against inflation. They start lowering interest rates. They're not lowering rates. They're raising them and pausing them at this high level, which means it's like this tabletop. They're plateauing. And when we have debt up to our eyeballs, when you pause rates at that high level, you've locked in high interest rates for the foreseeable future. This is going to be economically devastating to a country that's strapped for capital, where we've got inflationary pressures, higher cost of borrowing, lowering wages because of Biden's economic plan for America. I mean, this is really bad. Right.
Let me interrupt you really quick because I've got a question on exactly this topic that you're talking about, because I want to tie it back. You know, we talk a lot on this program, you and I, about the different nuances of the system, but I really want to drive home for everyone out there, especially those first-time listeners, how the interconnectivity around the world, the interdependence in these markets, how it comes home to roost here in the Federal Reserve System. Because as you eloquently highlighted, we have a petrodollar that is sort of had a boa constrictor type control of worldwide commerce, because it's been the basis of the energy markets, which is exactly what's coming out of the Middle East right now. When we look at these markets and we look at what this stands to do to the inflationary position of the U.S. economy, and in particular the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar, the desirability of the U.S. dollar, what the American economic landscape looks like. I mean, just last month, we had 9 out of 10 commercial real estate loans default, more than 670 million loans. That's an unheard of number, right? And Jim Cramer's out there telling us how amazing that the economy is, right? So these events that are occurring here right before our very eyes, is this not tantamount to the setup for a 1929 style event? I mean, we're already far more over leveraged now than we were in 2008, just 15 years ago.
Well, you're spot on. I mean, commercial real estate always precedes residential real estate collapses. Why? Because it's like the business owners. It's their companies. It's the companies that hire people. And when you see that kind of massive decline in default in commercial real estate, residential follows, right? So here's where we can't believe some of the lies and rhetoric coming out of DC that say we're winning this battle on inflation. The economy is strong, right? Look at what we're doing. It's like numbers don't justify that, right? So we've heard, to kind of amplify that statement that you just made, that the stock market's been doing really well over the last 60 days because the economy is very robust. There's been a lot of spending. Well, I don't think that may be true, but I don't think that it's real. I mean, and here's why. When you look at the fundamentals and the makeup of the spending, credit card debt right now is $1 trillion. It's the highest it's ever been, right? So what else is actually happening? The available credit lines, when you've got $1 trillion in debt and people are using their credit cards, they have available credit. So what happens when people have no income? Interest rates go up, they can't afford their payments. But what happens when they run out of credit line? The only way to get it back is to pay down those loans. They don't have the money. So we're basically sitting at a point where, for the most part, across America, people have tapped out their credit lines. I think the spending comes crashing down to earth, and 2024 is going to be an abysmal year for spending. I think it's going to happen well before that. So here's an interesting take, something that nobody really looks at. When you look at leading economic indicators, what's the economy going to do down the road? An economist will look at things like consumer price index, consumer sentiment, housing sales, things of that nature, right? Well, a real fun one to look at is box sales, like cardboard box sales. It's like, what, Kirk, you're nuts. It's like, how can that be a leading economic indicator? Cardboard box. Well, what's gets shipped in cardboard boxes? Everything, right? If you're buying something from Amazon, from Best Buy, from Walmart, you name it, TVs, small things, big things, everything comes in cardboard boxes. So the amount of cardboard boxes that have actually been sold, it's like fallen off a cliff. The amount of cardboard boxes is down over 79% since September, so the last 30 days. It's down well over 80% since January. If the big monster e-commerce retailers were expecting a good holiday season, they'd be buying boxes to ship everything out. They're not. Box sales are down literally over 80%. Well, what does that mean? It means they're expecting nobody's going to be buying anything, right? So here's the problem with that. The holiday season from Black Friday to Christmas, most retailers in America get 80% of all their annual revenue during that 1 month span. 80%. So if they're not expecting any sales, look at box sales. They're not expecting any sales. What happens come January? Layoffs, because they didn't meet the massive capital influx that retailers in America need to get in the holiday season. They didn't get it. So come January, they're going to have to lay people off. It's like, oh, now we've got this. We've got the war with Israel and Hamas. You've got lowering wages. You've got these interest rates that keep climbing. Now the petrodollar is going away and inflation is going to persist. And what do we do? Right. So I was just in California last week at a nonprofit gala that one of the nonprofits that our company supports, that fights sex trafficking, rescues women and children from trafficking. It was an amazing event. But when I was there, I had to fill up the horrible rental car with horrible priced gas in California, right? And it was $6.91 a gallon, $6.91. Well, the day after Hamas started shooting missiles into Israel, projections came out that said oil was going to go up to $150 a barrel. Well, where was it then? 93. So 93 to 150, that's over a 50% increase in price. Last weekend, Allianz, their investment department said, we're expecting oil to hit $140 a barrel. Same ballpark, but let's use a smaller number, 140. It's still up over 50%. So what is gasoline? It's refined oil. So if oil goes up 50%, the price of gas at the pumps should go up 50%. That would put gas prices in California that started at $6.91, let's call it $7 an ounce. What's 50% of that? $3.50. That puts gas at the pumps at over $10 a gallon because of the Hamas Israeli conflict. See, this is a problem, SG, because what uses petroleum? Everything. Your most advanced electric vehicle still has rubber tires. Oh, that's petroleum. Plastic dashboards. Oh, that's petroleum. Grease in the gears. That's petroleum. You can't get away from it, right? So here's the problem with America. Because of the environmental lobby over the last decades, we've got refining capacity that's down. You can't do any drilling in the Gulf. You can't drill in the Arctic. We're still oil dependent on foreign oil. We're not oil independent. So what did Iran do after they basically, the BRICS nations said, hey, we want you to be part of the BRICS nations? They're flexing and they're coaxing OPEC to cut production. Why? Well, when you cut production, you limit the supply. The demand is still high. It's like you just cause the prices to go up. The BRICS nations, with 6 of the 9 largest oil producers in the world, are going to receive the benefit from higher oil prices. We as Americans are going to see the net detriment of higher prices because we're not independent on our oil production. We're still dependent on foreign oil. So it's going to be a drain on us, a boost for them, yet another mechanism that Putin's statement is coming true. We are going to de-dollarize the world. I mean, they're doing it. I mean, literally, they are doing it. Now, to add fuel to this fire, over the last year, Biden has almost eliminated the strategic oil reserve, which is used and held back for times of war. So we don't have to be dependent on foreign oil for war. We've got these reserves to fuel our planes and tanks and everything else. Well, shoot, we're going into a wartime. He's used all of that, so you wouldn't have to buy expensive gas and oil, right? And what does that mean? They've understated inflation from what it really is because they haven't been buying it. But now they've got to replenish that strategic oil reserve at much higher prices because Iran decided to say, let's cut production, OPEC. Now we've got to replenish that at much higher prices, and the prices are going to go through the roof. See, SG, it's like the BRICS nations are playing a masterful game of chess, right? And they're 6-7 moves ahead. And their opponent is Biden, who's actually brought his checkerboard with them. It's like he's not even playing the same game. It's like, well, that's unfair. It's the unfair competition, right? It's like, but yet this is what's happening. But I want to take the angle of, no, our politicians aren't that stupid. They're not. You don't spend 30 years in Congress, 40 years in Congress. You don't get to that level by being stupid. Now, they might be evil. They might be globalists. They might not have America's best. It might, because when you see what's happening here, you've got the basically fiscally responsible GOP trying to tell the other part of the GOP, it's like, hey, we want a fiscally responsible person in the House. And they're saying, no, we're not voting these people in. It's like you've got Trump Republicans versus uniparty Republicans, which are siding with the globalists, with the World Economic Forum, with the Democrats. It's like this big, huge uniparty, and it's not working. They're going to run out of money, which means they're going to have to print money like there's no tomorrow, which is going to cause even higher interest rates to come. This is what I see happening come 2024, and it happens to be during an election year when the economy is going to tank, when things are persisting bad with higher interest rates, higher inflation, fewer jobs, and people will willingly, SG, give up their freedoms to whatever politician will promise them the most. That's the danger I see for America moving forward is we're about to willingly give up our freedoms in exchange for perceived security and peace.
You know, what's amazing about what you're highlighting here is it's the American Revolution all over again. Mm-hmm. It's every battle between the powers that seek to enslave and control and those who wish to exercise liberty and self-determination. It's the same flavor, the same misdirection, the same sleight of hand playbook, right? Q tells us on this program, we use that reference a lot. playbook known. These individuals use the exact same manipulation of the markets, manipulation of finance, manipulation of geopolitics to cause these events that we're now witnessing in real time, and we're sort of calling the shots because the playbook really is that predictable. And for the audience out there, I'd like to take a moment and just highlight a couple of things here when we're talking about just how predictable the playbook is. We know that a critical portion of the deep state's ability to control we the people, to influence our politics and our perspectives, and our responses around the world has been through their command of information. And for the first time in world history, we have a simultaneous sort of around the earth breaking through of that locus of control that is the narrative space. So while we have people like Jim Cramer going out there and saying that treasury bonds are great and that the market's doing very well and the S&P 500 is really projected to do wonderful, we have other information that's coming out to show, especially market evaluations, analysts, individuals that are parts of these cogs that are operating in these wheels, excuse me, and they're highlighting just how dangerous the situation really is to the worldwide economic markets. Taken from the Kobesi letter. This was just a few days ago. As a matter of fact, I think it was 1026 or 1027. The S&P 500 has officially entered a correction, now down 10% just from July. This means the market is down 10% from the date the Fed removed a recession from their forecast. So this is how blatantly these people lie, right? They will act like the house is perfectly fine as they march you into it, and it's burning down around you. It's worth noting as we encapsulate this for the audience out there that the S&P 500 has lost more than $4 trillion in the last 4 to 5 months. And meanwhile, the 7 largest tech stocks that are a part of that have lost collectively more than $500 billion in value. And when we consider that the S&P is primarily propped up by, that the markets are primarily propped up by the tech stocks, right? The big tech sector, Silicon Valley, Apple, Google, Facebook, all of these others, right? These otherworldly levels of wealth that have been generated by these entities. A great many of them are actually owned in large part or influenced in large part by the Chinese Communist Party. So what happens when we experience a war breakout in the Pacific due to the incompetent diplomacy, the persistent warmongering, the rattling of the sabers louder and louder from what is a very incapable deep state U.S. government, at least optically for the world to see, right? And that I think is part of the beauty of this entire process, is that we are witnessing the world change. We are witnessing policy shift. We are witnessing, as you highlighted, the disempowering of the U.S. dollar. And there are some, I think, some hopefuls to take away from that as well, right? When we look at restoring the balance of trade between nations, when we look at restoring the balance of economic cooperation, that is necessary. Fairness in a game is necessary for trust, right? The basis at the beginning of the outset must be a trust-based endeavor, or it will not work. And so we're sort of laying the groundwork, I think, for that. The problem with that is it causes an incredible amount of pain and discomfort to those of us in the West, in the central bank, European and North American model, who have been fortunate enough to live relatively undisturbed lives as the rest of the world was sort of tortured, if you will, by the deep state military industrial machine, to include Washington, D.C., and of course the manipulation and the control of the banking and finance system around the world. So with that being said, I guess where I'm trying to go with that, I get off on these tangents sometimes, is that there is beauty on the horizon, but there is a storm that we must walk through first, right? It's akin to being on the mountain, knowing that you have to go through the valley and you can see the mountains and the land on the other side, and you can see where you're going to go, and it's sunny and beautiful, but you know that there is a journey to be made on the way there. And Russia and a number of other nations, I think it's worth highlighting out there for the audience, have already made this journey. Now, the Russians have enjoyed a pretty poor quality of life for the last 30 years as a result of what happened with the economic terrorism of George Soros and the NATO central banksters. But now, having converted their economy essentially to a gold-backed standard, refusing to deal in large foreign transactions that involve manipulated or manipulatable money, this has really, I think, secured the Russian economy in a great way. Even here in the West, we've been forced to admit that the sanctions that we've heaped over onto Russia have been largely ineffective. And the Russian people are enjoying the largest quality of living increase that they've experienced in a number of years. So as we look at this process, Dr. Kirk, I guess what I'm leading into is the painful process of the removal or the disempowering, if you will, of a major economic system of control is not an easy subject, but it is also not the end of the journey. And we've talked a couple of
Right.
times on this program about a two-pronged possibility on the other side. We enter into a debt slave system that is more advanced, more digitally capable, or we break away from that, we resoundingly reject it, and we design something in its place. As we look at the forward here, as we look at where we're going, what do you think is the most likely option, and how do we get there?
So here's where I think there's a beauty from ashes moment, right? I think that the federal system, people who call me every single day are gripped and paralyzed with fear and think it's over, right? This is the mark of the beast, and central bank digital currency, the ability to cut you off from buying or selling. It's like, it's awful, right? And now that there's wartime happening and in the Middle East, the Antichrist, when he comes back, is what's gonna signal that reign? A peace treaty with Israel, right? So you got to be at war before there's a peace treaty signed. So I've got people just freaking out, right? It's like, it's the end of the times. It's like, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But what we do know, and what we can kind of tell, it's the end of an era for central bankers, right? I think that's truly what I feel, is that we're coming to that conclusion. And whenever you see the end of something that's been around for so long, literally since 1913, the Federal Reserve Act, changed the way that banking was done in America. It's over 100 years of everybody that's alive today. This is all that they've known. It's hard to change that without opposition and without almost revolution, right? Financially. So what we're moving into is complete overreach by globalist entities and by the Fed, saying we're going to have central bank digital currency that's digital, that tracks everything about you. It's completely big brother, and we have the ability to cut you off from buying or selling based on your ideology, right? I mean, in unified ledgers and the opposite of blockchain. And it's just like awful, right? So here's where I think the logical outcome, that's politically and economically kind of easy to do, would be the rising up of states' rights, right? The way that the founding fathers envisioned it in America, which states' rights, the federalist system means if a state can do it, then the feds shouldn't. If it's something that only the feds can do that the states aren't equipped to do, then it should be federal, right? So banking is one of those issues that you don't need Federal Reserve, right? So you've got state chartered banks like in Texas, for example, that missed the legislative deadline to actually do it, but they have big, massive vault near Dallas to hold gold because they want a state chartered central bank in Texas backed by gold. Get out of the Fed system, get out of the Fed now, get out of FDIC, get out of this globalist juggernaut. Alaska wants to do the same thing. There's about 7 other states, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Utah, and some others that have already legalized gold as legal tender. So what's the common denominator here? States getting out of the Fed system and wanting to have legal tender, tangible assets like gold or silver, which is actually what the founding fathers wanted. They said, yeah, tangible coins, gold and silver are currency, right? But we went into this world of fiat-based money creation, which is what caused us to amass tens of trillions of dollars, $34 trillion today of federal debt, multiple quadrillions of dollars of paper contract derivatives debt globally. I mean, that's ugly. I mean, that's quadrillions. SG, that's a lot. I don't even know. Nobody could ever count that high, but yet it's there, right? So this is the debt implosion that we're waiting to see. It's the end of an era, but I think the new era is going to be marked starting with states' rights and state chartered banks that start to strip away power from the federal system. And I think that's the easy way to do it. Now, you look at the common denominator, it's like, well, boy, that's a big ordeal. Well, it's like, but what are they allocating into? Currency that's backed by gold. You can do the same thing. See, central banks around the world, I don't care what they say, I watch what they do, right? That's what everybody should do. And you've got China, you've got Turkey, you've got Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, India, that are amassing gold by literally the thousands of tons. not ounces, not pounds, not tons, not hundreds of tons, thousands of tons. I mean, it's a lot. Some of them have hundreds of tons, but I don't care. When you're talking about tons of gold, it's a lot. They're buying that and keeping it to actually build up reserves for their currency in case things kind of fall apart. Nobody wants central bank digital currency. I think they said, we still want to be the reserve currency, and we've got a good one. It's backed by gold, right? So they know what's coming. They know that there's going to be a battle. So when you see that, what central bankers around the globe are doing, what states are wanting to do, having currency that's backed by gold, we can do the same thing as individuals. Maybe not to that scale. You and I can't buy gold by the ton. It's a lot. But what can we do? We can buy it by the ounce. You can buy silver by the ounce. It'll get you the same place. We always have to remember, it's like, it doesn't matter where you start, what amount, just start with what you've got, whether it's a few $100s, a few $1,000s, a few $100,000, a few $1 million, whatever it is, whatever you've been entrusted with, make sure that you have adequate protection against the machine, against the system that wants to control every aspect of your life. What's the best way to do that? By controlling what you buy and sell, right? So you can get out of that system by having a private asset like gold or silver that you could use for barter if need be. But it's actually just a great investment. When you look at it, it's fantastic. And since the Israeli-Hamas conflict started, sneakily, gold is now up over $2,000 an ounce. It was $1,800 a couple months ago. You look at silver, it's up over 23, it's about 23.40 an ounce. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was in the 20, or a couple months ago, it was in the 20s. It's like, man, this is amazing, right? So you allocate into strength. You do something that you take delivery of, or you have to store, because it's not paper. It's not digital. It's not easily manipulated like that. You have something that's real. That would be my advice to everybody, is start to act with boldness and courage and wisdom that Holy Spirit gives us, and operate in those moments where God wants to protect and preserve and allow you to thrive, not be some economic slave to some global entity. That's not how we were created. We're created for much more, and we can do that.
No, I really love that. And I love how, whenever you and I have these conversations, we come back to the core impetus of what's happening in the world. It is biblical. Q says it is biblical. It's going to be biblical, excuse me. And what do we have now? We have the United States in a position it's never been in, and much of the world never thought it could ever be in. We have an Armageddon-style war gearing up in the Middle East, and we have a worldwide rejection of what amounts to Satan's money. A worldwide rejection of the ability to manipulate finance, to create money out of thin air, right? The U.S. debt clock just recently ran a picture with the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz that said money creation is a scam only a wizard could love.
That.
So what's so amazing is that the world en masse, not only here in North America, but the rest of us also, we're waking up simultaneously to how big of a Ponzi scheme we've all been participating in, and how this really comes back to restoring we the people to not only our rightful places of power and control, but the ability to direct our societies. Money does control a great deal of what occurs here in the world. It is the intangible vector by which we exchange value. It allows us to do business with one another and build partnerships and co-create with one another in ways that would not be available were money a non-existent thing, right? And perhaps someday, many hundreds of years into the future, we may see a world develop where, a mutually beneficial multi-angular varied barter system could actually work and replace the idea. But we don't live currently in those times right here, right now. We're taking the world out of a monetary slave system, a fiat fraud that has promulgated some of the worst suffering conceivable onto not only the United States, but the entire rest of the whole world. And we're inverting that and breaking away from it. Dr. Kirk, I really appreciate you coming on today. Any final thoughts? Where can people find you if they have any questions or comments or concerns? And what are some small steps that people with low budgets, in other words, not any real discretionary money or perhaps very little discretionary money, what can they do as they face this time, as they look down the barrel of what is clearly a major geopolitical shift in the world and brace for what's to come?
So I would encourage you to just act, right? It's like, take that leap of faith, talk to somebody that you've never talked to before, but boy, SG and Kirk seem to get along great. That's the first step, is give us a call. or fill out the web form that we have, kirkelliottphd.com/SG, or just give our office a call, 720-605-3900, and just say that SG sent you. This is where it begins, right? Because how that process will look, we'll just find out, hey, what was it the Kirk and SG were talking about? What gives you concern? What are your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations? What do you want to do? And then we'll set you up with an appointment with one of our advisors who will dig in deep to your own personal situation and map out a strategy for success that'll take advantage of these trends rather than those trends taking advantage of you. That's our goal. So give us a call. It's a free consultation. I mean, that is what we want. And we can't, this is why we're not an e-commerce site. We're not financial advisors, so to speak, like a stockbroker, mutual fund insurance agent, right? We focus on tangible assets to protect and preserve and to grow and thrive. We're people over profit. We don't charge a commission when you liquidate. There's a cost of ownership when you buy something, right? But the consultations are free because this is our anointing. It's our calling to impact the masses, to make sure that to anybody who's listening, we can help you get out of harm's way into the right place at the right time. That's our goal, SG. And that's what I would want to leave people with is take that first leap of faith. Give us a call and we'll help you out.
There you have it, Patriots. We come together and we support one another in hard times, and we do our level best to connect one another with the best options, the best availability, the best opportunity that we can sort of unearth as we march forward together into what amounts to a promised land and a new world for humanity. Dr. Kirk, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to our next discussion. Until then, stay safe. Everyone, this has been SG Anon from the Q News Patriot. I'll be back with you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.